In the fading light of a Montana evening, as amber tones washed over the dry landscape of Yellowstone National Park, an unusual scene unfolded. Three men advanced silently, eyes fixed on their prey. A boy of about 15, fallen among the bushes, his leg visibly dislocated. He was injured after trying to escape from something he should never have crossed paths with. As the hunter's footsteps echoed through the parched vegetation, an elderly woman appeared before them. Alone, seemingly fragile, but with a gaze so firm and deep that it made the men hesitate. This was no simple apparition. It was the beginning of something that would shake what had until then been considered immutable. Ethan, a teenage boy from Boston, was on a school excursion to Yellowstone National Park. Known for his shyness and unusual interest in botany, he had strayed from the group after spotting a rare wildflower and had gotten lost in the tall grass. What began as simple curiosity transformed into a nightmare when he witnessed a group of armed men take down a gray wolf, a protected animal and symbol of environmental preservation in the region. When spotted, he tried to run, but tripped, rolling down a slope and seriously injuring himself. Disoriented, with intense pain and an immobilized leg, Ethan barely perceived the imminent danger. The three men, illegal hunters, knew they needed to silence this witness. But what they found was not a defenseless boy, but unexpected resistance. The woman who appeared before them was Martha, a reclusive resident who had lived for decades in a small cabin on the edges of the park. Known among the villagers as the healer of Yellowstone, Martha carried with her stories and secrets of the land, the fauna, and the people who had once settled there. With her serene but unwavering gesture, she confronted the hunters. Without raising her voice, only with her posture and the symbolic hickory stick in her hands, she made the men back down. That interruption gave time for two others to appear. Ray, a retired forest ranger, with a soft-spoken manner but always attentive gaze, and Sarah, a former folk dancer who, after an accident, had found in the simple life of the mountains a new form of expression. The three formed an unlikely but cohesive trio, each with scars from a world that barely tolerates those who don't follow its norms. Ray had been discarded after reporting illegal deforestation promoted by local politicians. Sarah had lost everything after refusing to perform in a show that propagated stereotypes about rural America. Martha never told her whole story, but everyone knew that one day she had lost a daughter to the big city and was never the same again. Ethan, although frightened, realized he was being protected by people who understood much more than he could imagine. That night, spent in Martha's humble cabin, revealed a parallel world where society's invisible found meaning by becoming protectors of what remained intact. The leader of the hunters, known only as Falcon, had bigger interests. Working for a powerful construction company from Denver, he sought to weaken Yellowstone's environmental protections to pave the way for an ambitious ecological resort project. Ethan wasn't just an inconvenience, he was a threat. His mere presence could dismantle the entire plan, as he had seen and recorded the criminal actions. In the following days, while the school, firefighters, and police searched for the missing boy, Falcon and his men intensified the hunt. On the other hand, Martha, Ray, and Sarah activated an ancient resistance network, a group of former park employees, anonymous environmentalists, conscious farmers, and riverside dwellers, forgotten by time. A silent movement, but immensely effective, that spread between unmarked trails, untouched rivers, and forgotten caves. Protecting Ethan became more difficult each day. With his legs still recovering, the boy needed to be transferred to a safer location. And that's when the proposal came up to take him to Spirit Cave, a sacred place for the region's ancient inhabitants, hidden behind a waterfall and accessible only to those who knew the park's topography like the back of their hand. During the Ida move, the group faced drones, trackers, and veiled threats from authorities co-opted by real estate interests, but they also faced internal dilemmas. Ethan questioned whether he should really flee or if he should face his situation head-on. He wanted to tell the world what he had seen, but feared putting his protectors at risk. Martha, for her part, knew that this boy represented a last chance to perpetuate a mission that already threatened to disappear with time. Upon reaching the cave, Ethan experienced something indescribable: the living silence of stone, the breath, of time in the stalactites, and the energy that pulsed from the roots invading the space. It was as if nature accepted him, even without him yet understanding his role. There, finally, he made a choice, no longer as a victim, but as an agent of a truth that needed to come to light. Without yet knowing how, he promised himself he would find a way to expose the crimes, protect his new friends, and ensure that Yellowstone would continue to be more than just a postcard scenery. It would be a symbol of living resistance. Little did he know that his decision would initiate a movement that, in a short time, would forever change the destiny of that land and the people who dared to defend it. The first night in Martha's cabin was a blur of pain and confusion for Ethan. His leg throbbed with a dull ache, expertly set and wrapped in a poultice that smelled of earth and pine. Through the haze, he could make out the three figures moving around the small space, their voices low but urgent. "Falcon won't stop," Ray murmured, his weathered hands wrapped around a steaming mug. "He's got too much riding on this deal." Sarah nodded, her once graceful dancer's posture now marked by a slight hunch. "The Horizon Corporation has been trying to get their hands on the North Ridge for years. This is their big chance." Martha, her silver hair catching the firelight, remained silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of decades. "This boy is not just a witness, he's a catalyst." Ethan tried to sit up, wincing as pain shot through his leg. "I recorded everything," he managed to say, drawing their attention. "On my phone, the wolf, the men, their conversation about clearing the land." Martha moved to his side, her eyes searching his face. "Where is this phone now?" Ethan's heart sank. "In my backpack. I dropped it when I fell." The three exchanged glances loaded with meaning. "First light," Ray said, nodding toward the window, where the moon hung low over the pine trees. "I'll go back and look." Martha placed a gentle hand on Ethan's forehead. "Rest now. Tomorrow we begin." As sleep pulled him under, Ethan couldn't shake the image of the wolf. Majestic and wild one moment, broken the next. He'd come to Yellowstone because of his fascination with untamed places, the kind that were becoming increasingly rare in his technology-saturated world. His classmates had laughed when he'd packed field guides instead of video games for the trip. Now, in this strange cabin with these unusual guardians, he felt a connection to something ancient and vital. The dawn broke clear and cold over the mountains. Ethan awoke to find Martha alone in the cabin, grinding herbs with a stone mortar and pestle. "The others?" he asked, accepting a cup of strong, bitter tea from her hands. "Searching," she replied, simply. "Ray knows every inch of these mountains. If your backpack is there, he'll find it." Martha's eyes, keen despite her years, studied him. "You're not what I expected." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "What do you mean?" "A city boy with the heart of a naturalist. Rare these days." Her hands never stopped their rhythmic grinding. "Tell me why you wandered from your group." The question was gentle but direct. Ethan looked down at his tea. There was a flower, a Yellowstone sand verbena. It shouldn't have been blooming yet. Not for another month at least. "I wanted to document it." He hesitated. "My classmates think I'm weird. The teachers too, probably. But I've been tracking climate changes through early blooming patterns for a science project." Martha's expression shifted subtly. "You understand then? The balance is delicate. When it tips..." She didn't need to finish. Ethan nodded. He knew about ecosystem collapse, tipping points, the fragility of biological systems faced with rapid change. What he didn't understand was why anyone would deliberately harm a keystone species like the gray wolf, an animal whose presence was vital to Yellowstone's health. The men who shot the wolf, why would they do that? Don't they know how important wolves are to the park? Martha's hands stilled. They know. That's precisely why they did it. She moved to the window, looking out at the vast landscape. Remove the predator, weaken the ecosystem, create a crisis, then offer a solution, a managed wilderness experience with hotels and restaurants where the forests once stood. The strategy was chillingly logical. Ethan felt sick. Outside, a bird call cut through the morning quiet. 3 short whistles. Martha's posture changed instantly. "Someone's coming. Stay quiet." She moved with surprising speed, helping Ethan to his feet and guiding him toward what appeared to be a solid wall. With practiced hands, she pressed a hidden latch, revealing a narrow space behind. "No matter what you hear," she whispered urgently, "do not come out until I call for you." The secret door closed, leaving Ethan in darkness. Through a crack, he could see Martha transform before his eyes. Her straight posture slumped, her clear eyes clouded with a vacant stare. She shuffled to a rocking chair and began to hum tunelessly, just as heavy boots sounded on the porch steps. The cabin door swung open without a knock. "Morning, old woman," came a smooth, cultured voice that made Ethan's blood run cold. "Mind if we come in? We're looking for a lost boy." Martha's vacant expression revealed nothing, as the man who called himself Falcon stepped into the cabin. Tall and lean, with a precision to his movements that spoke of calculation, he surveyed the humble space with cold eyes. Behind him, 2 more men hovered at the threshold, their posture tense and watchful. "Just making my rounds," Martha mumbled, her voice suddenly frail and wavering. "No visitors here but the birds and squirrels." Falcon's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Is that so? Because we tracked a missing teenager to this general area. Boston kid on a school trip. Wandered off, got himself hurt. We're very concerned." He moved around the cabin with practiced ease, picking up items and setting them down, his gaze missing nothing. "Rangers are out looking for him. Should have let the professionals handle it from the start." In his hiding place, Ethan held his breath. Through the crack, he could see one of Falcon's men nudging Martha's collection of herbs with the toe of his boot. "Still playing witch doctor, Martha? Thought the Park Service asked you to stop harvesting inside the boundaries?" Martha rocked, steadily, seemingly unperturbed. "My grandmother's remedies, nothing more." Falcon paused at a shelf of ancient books, running a finger along their spines. "You know, there's a place for people like you in our vision for New Yellowstone. A living history exhibit. Tourists love that authentic touch." His voice hardened. "But only if you play along. Old-timers resisting progress. That doesn't fit the narrative." He turned to face her directly. "You've seen the boy, haven't you?" For a heart-stopping moment, Martha's eyes flickered toward the hidden panel. Then she laughed, a cackling sound that raised the hair on Ethan's neck. "I see many things. The past, the future sometimes. I see a man playing with forces he doesn't understand." Falcon's jaw tightened. "Don't test me, old woman. Your friends aren't here to protect you now." Martha's rocking intensified. "The mountains have ears. The rivers have eyes. You are watched. Francis Hartley of Denver, Colorado. You are known." Falcon recoiled as if struck. His hand moved briefly toward his jacket before he caught himself. "We'll be back. And next time, I won't be so patient." With a sharp gesture to his men, he turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "By the way, your friend Ray was spotted near Eagle Point this morning. Seemed to be looking for something. Hope he didn't have an accident out there all alone." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Then they were gone, the sound of their vehicle fading into the distance. Martha remained rocking for several long minutes. Finally, she stood and moved to the hidden panel. "They're gone," she said, helping Ethan out. Her transformation was complete. The doddering old woman vanished, replaced by the clear-eyed, straight-backed Martha he'd first met. "How did you do that?" Ethan asked, awed despite his fear. "Years of practice," Martha replied grimly. "Sometimes the best defense is to be underestimated." She moved to the window, scanning the tree line. "We need to move you. They'll be back. Hand with more men." Ethan sank onto a chair, his leg throbbing. He threatened Ray, and he knew his name. Martha's expression darkened. "Falcon has informants everywhere. Park Service, local police, even among the townspeople." She began gathering, supplies moving with urgent purpose. "We have a network too, older, deeper." A rustling sound outside brought them both to alert stillness. Martha relaxed at the distinctive pattern of knocks that followed. She opened the door to reveal Sarah, her face flushed from exertion. "They've got roadblocks on all the main roads," she reported breathlessly. "And drones over the eastern sector." She nodded at Ethan. "How's the patient?" "I'll manage," Ethan said, though his leg felt like it was on fire. "Did you find Ray?" Martha and Sarah exchanged a look that made Ethan's stomach clench. "He's fine," Sarah said finally. "But there's been a complication." She pulled something from her pack, Ethan's phone, its screen cracked but intact. "Ray found your backpack. The good news is we have your evidence. The bad news..." She grimaced. "The search party found it too. They know you're alive and they know what you saw." Martha took the phone, examining it. "Can they trace this?" Ethan shook his head. "Not unless it's turned on. I know how to prevent that." At their questioning looks, he flushed. "I'm good with technology. It's kind of my thing, along with the plants." Sarah's expression brightened slightly. "That could be useful. Very useful indeed." She turned to Martha. "The council is gathering tonight, full moon. They need to see what this boy recorded, and they need to decide." Martha nodded gravely. "The spirit cave, then. We have no choice." Ethan looked between them, confusion evident. "Council? What council?" Martha began packing a small bag with supplies. "You're not the first to witness Falcon's work, nor are you the first to stand against it. For generations there have been those who protect the wild places. We call ourselves the Guardians." She handed Ethan a worn jacket that smelled of pine smoke. "Put this on. Where we're going, it gets cold at night." As Ethan struggled into the jacket, wincing as the movement jarred his leg, Sarah continued the explanation. "The Guardians formed during the first wave of commercial development around Yellowstone. Rangers, scientists, local tribes, concerned citizens, people who understood what was at stake. We operate in the shadows because those with money and power prefer to work without opposition. But if you have evidence of illegal hunting, of conspiracy," Ethan protested, "why not go to the authorities, the media?" Sarah's laugh was bitter. "Horizon Corporation owns 3 newspapers and sponsors the re-election campaigns of both our senators. As for the authorities," she gestured vaguely, "you saw how easily Falcon spoke of having Ray followed. The corruption runs deep." A sudden noise outside, the unmistakable whir of a drone, cut the conversation short. Martha moved quickly, dousing the fire and gathering the last of their supplies. "The back way," she said tersely, "through the willow grove." They slipped out a rear door concealed by overgrown vines, Martha supporting Ethan as they made their way through dense underbrush. Every step was agony for Ethan, but the alternative, falling into Falcon's hands, pushed him forward. They reached a small stream where Sarah was waiting with 3 horses. "You ride?" she asked Ethan, already knowing the answer from his wide-eyed expression. "Don't worry. Thunder knows the way. Just hold on." With their help, Ethan mounted the sturdy bay gelding. The horse seemed to sense his inexperience, standing patiently until he found his balance. As they set off following the stream into increasingly rugged terrain, Ethan fought waves of pain and exhaustion. His mind raced with questions. Who exactly were these people? How extensive was this network of Guardians? And what could they possibly do against the resources of a corporation like Horizon? The narrow trail wound through stands of aspen and pine, climbing steadily. Twice they stopped, listening intently as drones passed overhead. Each time Martha led them under dense canopy until the threat moved on. As the afternoon waned, they entered a part of the park Ethan didn't recognize from any map or guidebook. The landscape grew wilder, more primeval somehow. Ancient trees towered overhead, their massive trunks covered in luminous moss. The air smelled different, sharper, more alive. "Where are we?" Ethan whispered, feeling as though normal volume would somehow profane this place. "The old growth," Sarah answered softly. "One of the last untouched sections, not on any tourist map." Martha, riding ahead, called back, "The ancients called this the Whispering Forest. Listen carefully, and you might hear why." Ethan strained his ears. At first he heard only the natural sounds of the woods, wind in leaves, distant bird calls, the soft footfalls of their horses. Then, gradually, he became aware of something else. A rhythmic susurration, almost like breath, seemed to pulse through the very air around them. "What is that?" he asked, a shiver running down his spine. "The heart of Yellowstone," Martha replied simply. As dusk deepened into night, they reached a narrow ravine. Dismounting, They led the horses down a treacherous path that ended at a silver ribbon of waterfall. The moonlight transformed the cascading water into a curtain of light. "Spirit Cave lies behind the falls," Sarah explained, helping Ethan down from his horse. "It's been a meeting place for centuries, first for the indigenous peoples, then for those who followed in their footsteps as protectors." Martha secured the horses, then approached the waterfall. To Ethan's amazement, she began to sing, a haunting melody without words that somehow blended with the sound of the falling water. As her voice rose and fell, the curtain of water seemed to part slightly, revealing a narrow passage behind. "Acoustic manipulation," Sarah whispered to Ethan, seeing his astonished expression. "The cave entrance is designed to respond to specific sound frequencies. Martha's one of the few who still knows the old songs." They helped Ethan through the gap, the spray soaking them as they passed behind the thundering water. Beyond lay a short tunnel that opened into a space so vast and unexpected that Ethan gasped aloud. The Spirit Cave was a cathedral of stone, its soaring ceiling lost in shadows. Natural columns of stalactites and stalagmites created a forest of stone. Most remarkable of all, the entire chamber glowed with a soft blue-green light emanating from masses of bioluminescent fungi that clung to the walls and ceiling. And in the center of this otherworldly space stood a circle of people, at least 20 of varying ages and backgrounds, all watching their entrance with solemn attention. Ray stepped forward from the group, his face betraying relief at their safe arrival. "Welcome to the Council of Guardians," he said to Ethan. "We've been waiting for you." A tall woman with striking white hair, streaked with a single black streak, moved to the center of the circle. Her presence commanded immediate attention, a natural authority that needed no explanation. "I am Willow," she announced, her voice echoing in the vast space, "lead guardian of the Western Territories, and you, Ethan Mitchell, have sparked a fire that cannot be extinguished." She extended her hand. "Show us what you have witnessed." With trembling hands, Ethan pulled the cracked phone from his pocket. The council members gathered closer as he navigated to the video files. "I started recording when I saw them tracking the wolf," he explained, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "I was documenting the sand verbena when I heard them coming." The video began to play, its harsh light incongruous in the gentle bioluminescence of the cave. The footage was shaky at first, Ethan's excited documentation of the rare flower, then steadied as he'd hidden behind a rock outcropping. 3 men came into view, moving with purpose through the underbrush, rifles slung over their shoulders. Their voices carried clearly in the still air. "Telemetry says the Alpha's just ahead," one said, checking a handheld device. "Remember, clean shot. We need it to look like natural causes." Another man, Falcon, replied with chilling certainty. "One less predator makes our environmental impact study that much easier. The development plan requires minimal wildlife disruption." The third man laughed. "Hard to have a luxury resort with wolves howling at the cabins." They moved forward, and the camera followed shakily as Ethan crept along a parallel path. Then came the moment that had seared itself into his memory, the magnificent grey wolf stepping into a clearing, alert but unafraid in what should have been the safety of protected land. The shot, when it came, was sudden and devastating. The wolf collapsed, and Ethan's involuntary gasp alerted the men to his presence. The video became a chaotic blur as he fled, ending abruptly when he fell. A profound silence filled the cave when the recording finished. Willow's face was grave in the blue-green light. This evidence confirms what we have suspected: Horizon. Corporation is systematically undermining the ecosystem to pave the way for their resort. She turned to a weathered man, whose ranger uniform bore no official patches. "Thomas, what's the status of the wolf packs?" The man stepped forward. 3 alphas missing in the past month. Without leadership, the packs are disintegrating. Elk populations are already surging beyond sustainable levels. A murmur ran through the gathered guardians. Ethan looked around, taking in their diverse faces, young and old, representing various backgrounds and ethnicities, yet united by a common purpose. A woman wearing the insignia of a wildlife biologist spoke next. "The environmental impact assessment for the resort is scheduled for review next week. With manipulated data showing a naturally declining wolf population, they'll argue the development poses no additional threat. Ray nodded grimly. And with Senator Campbell pushing the job. Creation angle. The review board is under enormous pressure to approve. Ethan's mind raced. But my video. It proves they're deliberately sabotaging the ecosystem. Can't we just release it to the media? A heavy silence met his question. Finally, a younger guardian with a journalist's press pass hanging around his neck spoke up. I work for the Tribune. My editor has killed 3 stories about Horizon's environmental violations in the past year. Corporate ownership, he gestured helplessly. Same story across most major outlets. Social media then, Ethan persisted. We could go viral. Sarah shook her head. Horizon employs an army of online reputation managers. They'd bury it under claims of digital manipulation, conspiracy theories, or simple information overload. By the time anyone verified the footage, the development would be approved and construction begun. The reality of their situation sank in. Ethan slumped against a stone column, his injured leg throbbing in time with his pulse. So they just win? We just let them destroy everything? Martha, who had been silent until now, moved to the center of the circle. Not everything is as it seems, young one, nor are we as powerless as you think. She turned to address the council. The boy's evidence is important, but it's only part of what we need. What of the ancient mapping project? A guardian stepped forward, a woman of Native American descent, whose quiet dignity commanded immediate respect. The subterranean river system has been fully documented, she reported, just as our ancestors' oral histories described. The entire northern development zone sits atop a network of limestone caverns and underground waterways. Willow nodded, understanding dawning on her face. If that hydrological system were included in the environmental assessment, the entire project would be deemed structurally unsound, finished Thomas, excitement building in his voice. No insurance company would back it. For the first time, Ethan saw a glimmer of hope in the faces around him. Then Falcon's earlier threat echoed in his mind. But Ray was spotted looking for my backpack. They know something's happening. Won't they try to stop us? Ray grimaced. They're already trying. Roadblocks, drones, private security posing as additional rangers. They're watching all the usual channels. Willow considered this, her piercing eyes reflecting the cave's ethereal light. Then we must use unusual channels. She straightened, decision made. We need to move on 3 fronts simultaneously. First, we need to get Ethan's footage and the hydrological survey to someone with the authority and integrity to act on it. She looked toward a distinguished older man who had yet to speak. Judge Harmon, you've been quiet. What say you? The judge cleared his throat. Environmental Protection Agency Regional Director Eleanor Walsh. She's beyond Horizon's influence and has the power to halt the review pending a criminal investigation. But reaching her won't be easy. She's at a conference in Jackson Hole, heavily scheduled and surrounded by aides who may not be trustworthy. Willow nodded. Second front, we need to secure the physical evidence of the mapping project and ensure multiple copies exist in safe locations. She turned to the Native American woman. Diana, your team will handle this. Diana inclined her head in acknowledgement. And the third front? Asked Sarah, her dancer's intuition sensing there was more. To Willow's strategy. Distraction, Willow said simply. While Horizon focuses on finding Ethan and stopping whatever they think we're planning, we'll execute the real plan. She surveyed the group. We need to create a very public, very noticeable decoy operation that will draw their resources away from our actual movements. The council erupted in discussion, voices overlapping as various strategies were proposed and rejected. Ethan watched in fascination as these disparate individuals, each with their own expertise and perspective, worked together like a well-oiled machine. He had never witnessed adults collaborating with such purpose, such absence of ego or power. Struggles. This wasn't like the school committees or local government meetings he'd observed, where posturing and politics overwhelmed actual progress. These people were unified by something larger than themselves. As the planning continued, Martha appeared at his side with a steaming cup of tea. "Drink this," she instructed, "for the pain." Ethan accepted gratefully, the herbal concoction warming him from the inside. "I've never seen anything like this," he admitted, gesturing toward the council. "How long has this been going on?" Martha settled beside him, her eyes distant with memory. "The Guardians have existed in some form since the park was established. When humans designate a place as protected, it doesn't automatically become so. Protection requires vigilance, sacrifice, and sometimes confrontation." She studied his face. "You're part of this now. Not by choice, perhaps, but by circumstance. The question is, what will you do with that responsibility?" Before Ethan could answer, Willow's voice cut through the discussion. "It's decided then, we move at dawn." She approached Ethan, her expression serious but kind. "Young man, you have a choice to make. We can arrange safe passage for you back to your school group. You've done your part by bringing us this evidence. No one would blame you for returning to your life." Ethan felt the weight of every eye in the cave upon him. His leg ached, his body craved rest, and part of him, the part that was still just a 15-year-old boy, desperately wanted the comfort of the familiar. But something had changed in him since he'd watched that wolf fall. Some dormant sense of purpose had awakened. "What's the alternative?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Willow's expression remained neutral, but approval flickered in her eyes. "You come with us. It won't be safe, it won't be comfortable, but you'll see this through to the end." The choice seemed monumental, life-altering. Yet somehow it also felt like no choice at all, as if his path had been set the moment he'd decided to follow that rare flower into the wilderness. "I want to help," he said firmly, "whatever it takes." Ray clapped him on the shoulder. "Brave lad, but not tonight. Tonight, you rest." As the council dispersed to prepare for the morning's operations, Martha led Ethan to a small alcove where bedding had been arranged. The pain in his leg had subsided to a dull throb thanks to her medicinal tea. As he settled onto the surprisingly comfortable pallet, he found himself studying the glowing fungi that illuminated the cave. "What are they?" he asked drowsily, pointing to the bioluminescent growth. "Foxfire mushrooms," Martha replied, "a rare variant found only in a few limestone caves in this region. They respond to sound vibrations. See how they pulse brighter when we speak?" Ethan watched, fascinated, as the blue-green glow intensified with her voice, then faded to a steady shimmer in the silence that followed. "Everything in nature is connected," Martha continued softly. "These mushrooms feed on minerals in the rock, which come from water filtering through the soil above, which is nourished by plants that grow because wolves keep the elk from overgrazing, which allows trees to flourish, providing homes for birds that spread seeds." She smiled at his rapt attention. "This is what Falcon and his kind never understand. They see pieces, parts to be exploited. They never see the whole." Ethan's eyelids grew heavy. "If everything's connected," he murmured, "then everything's vulnerable too. Break one link." Martha nodded solemnly. "That's why we fight so hard for every species, every acre, every drop of clean water, not just for their sake, but for the whole web of life, including our own." As sleep claimed him, Ethan's mind filled with images of wolves and wildflowers, underground rivers and luminous fungi, all connected by invisible threads that stretched across the landscape. Somewhere in that web, he now had a place, a purpose. In the morning, chaos erupted before dawn. Ethan was awakened by urgent voices and hurried movement. Ray appeared at his side, face grim. "Change of plans. Falcon's men have surrounded the waterfall. Someone betrayed our location." Ethan scrambled to his feet, ignoring the pain that shot through his injured leg. "What do we do?" Ray helped him gather his few belongings. "There's another way out, an underground passage that follows the river. Willow's already leading. The first group through." They made their way to the rear of the massive cavern, where Guardians were disappearing into a narrow fissure in the rock wall. Sarah materialized beside them, her usual grace replaced by tense urgency. "Martha's holding them off at the waterfall entrance," she reported breathlessly. "Some kind of... I don't know. She called it misdirection." A distant shout echoed through the cave, followed by the sound of splashing water. "We need to move," Ray urged, guiding Ethan toward the fissure. "Stay close to me." As they squeezed into the narrow passage, Ethan glanced back at the magnificent cavern, now mostly empty of guardians. The foxfire mushrooms pulsed with an almost frantic energy, responding to the commotion. Then they were in darkness, feeling their way along a slick stone corridor that descended at a steep angle. The sound of rushing water grew louder with each step. "The river flows for almost 3 miles underground," Ray explained, his voice barely audible above the watery roar. "It emerges near Thunder Basin. If we can reach it without being detected, we have a chance." Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew more distant. Whatever Martha was doing seemed to be working. Ethan sent up a silent prayer for her safety as they continued their descent into the earth. The passage grew narrower, the air damper. Water seeped through the limestone walls, creating slippery conditions. Twice Ethan nearly fell, saved only by Ray's steady grip on his arm. "Almost there," Ray encouraged as they rounded a bend and saw a faint glow ahead. The passage opened suddenly into another cavern, smaller than the spirit cave but no less impressive. A swift underground river cut through its center, the water black and sleek in the light of several lanterns held by waiting guardians. Willow stood at the water's edge, directing operations as several small inflatable rafts were prepared. "Ray, Sarah," she acknowledged their arrival with a nod. "And Ethan. Good. You'll take the second raft with Thomas and Diana." She surveyed the group with calculating eyes. "Remember your assignments. If we're separated, proceed to your designated rendezvous points. No unnecessary risks." As they helped Ethan into the wobbling raft, a tremendous boom shook the cavern, sending small stones pattering down from the ceiling. "What was that?" Ethan gasped as dust filled the air. Thomas's expression was grim as he pushed their raft into the current. "Martha," he said simply, "creating our diversion." The underground river carried them swiftly through the darkness, the current strong and purposeful, as if it too were a guardian hastening their escape. Ethan gripped the sides of the raft, his knuckles white, as they were swept along the subterranean waterway. The beam of Thomas's waterproof flashlight caught glittering mineral deposits on the cavern walls and occasionally illuminated startling formations, stone curtains, massive columns, and once a cluster of blind white fish darting away from the light. "How long has this river been here?" Ethan asked, his voice barely audible above the rush of water. Diana, who was steering their raft with expert precision, answered without taking her eyes off the darkness ahead. "The Shoshone have known of it for thousands of years. They called it the breath of the mountain. When the first European explorers came, the tribal elders kept it secret." She navigated around a jutting rock with a slight adjustment of her paddle. "Some secrets protect themselves, others need guardians." The river curved sharply, and their raft bumped gently against the lead vessel where Willow sat with 2 other guardians. The small flotilla had paused at a junction where a second waterway joined theirs, doubling the river's volume. Willow signaled, with her flashlight, 3 quick blinks. Thomas responded with 2. "Split up here," he explained to Ethan. "Different exit points. Harder to track." Willow's raft took the left fork, disappearing almost immediately around a bend. 3 more rafts followed her. Thomas, Diana, and Sarah guided their vessel into the right passage, with Ray and the remaining guardians close behind. The ceiling lowered as they progressed, sometimes forcing them to duck as the raft sped beneath curtains of stone. The air grew noticeably cooler, carrying a hint of pine and open sky. They were approaching an exit. Ethan's mind raced, wondering about Martha's fate. The explosion they'd heard still echoed in his memory. "Will Martha be okay?" he whispered to Sarah, who was crouched beside him. Her expression was unreadable in the dim light. "Martha has survived. Worse, she knows more about these mountains than anyone living." There was confidence in her voice, but Ethan detected an undercurrent of worry. "She'll meet us at the sanctuary if she can." A sudden jolt threw Ethan forward as their raft scraped against an unseen obstacle. Diana swore softly, maneuvering them free with powerful strokes of her paddle. "Rivers lower than last time," she muttered. "Droughts affecting even the underground systems." Thomas nodded grimly. "Another reason Horizon's environmental assessment is criminally negligent. Their development would further deplete the aquifer. The passage widened abruptly, and starlight filtered down through a jagged opening above. Diana guided the raft to a narrow stone shelf. "End of the line for watercraft," she announced. "We walk from here." Helping Ethan from the raft, they quickly deflated it, hiding all evidence of their passage. His injured leg had stiffened during the long ride, and he struggled to put weight on it. Without comment, Ray appeared at his side, offering his shoulder for support. "The sanctuary is 3 miles east," Thomas said, consulting a compass. "Difficult terrain, but we should make it by noon if we keep a steady pace." They set off in single file, following a game trail that wound through dense pine forest. The morning sun filtered through the canopy, creating dappled patterns on the forest floor. Under different circumstances, Ethan might have found it beautiful. Now every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every snapping twig a pursuer. An hour into their hike, they crested a small ridge. Thomas raised his hand, signaling a halt. Silently, he pointed to a plume of smoke rising from the direction they'd come. "Martha's diversion," Sarah whispered. "She collapsed part of the cave system." Ethan's stomach clenched. "With her inside?" Ray shook his head. Knowing Martha, she had an escape route planned, but it will keep Falcon's men busy and draw emergency services. Exactly the distraction we needed. They continued their trek, moving more cautiously now. Twice they froze at the distant sound of helicopters pressing themselves against tree trunks until the threat passed overhead. By mid-morning, Ethan was struggling. His leg throbbed mercilessly, and exhaustion dragged at him like a physical weight. Years of urban living had not prepared him for this kind of endurance test. Yet something kept him moving. The memory of the wolf, the urgency of their mission, and increasingly, a sense of belonging to this unlikely group of defenders. They stopped briefly by a clear stream to refill water bottles and rest. Diana unwrapped Ethan's leg, examining the swelling with expert hands. "The poultice is helping, but you need proper medical attention soon," she told him, rewrapping the injury with fresh bandages from her pack. "The sanctuary has a clinic. Dr. Abernathy will take care of you." Ethan nodded gratefully, then froze as a distinctive electronic chirp sounded from his pocket. His phone, which should have been powered off, was somehow active. Thomas reacted, instantly reaching for the device. "Tracker," he hissed, his face pale. "They've remotely activated your phone's GPS." Before Ethan could respond, Thomas had the back cover off, extracting the battery with practiced movements. But the damage was done. In the distance, the helicopter sounds changed direction, growing louder. "Move!" Ray ordered, helping Ethan to his feet. "They've found us!" They abandoned the trail, plunging into the thickest part of the forest. Ethan bit back cries of pain as branches whipped his face and his injured leg caught on undergrowth. The helicopter noise grew deafening, circling directly overhead. Then came the sound they'd all been dreading, the mechanical whine of ATVs approaching rapidly from the west. "We can't outrun them," Sarah gasped, helping support Ethan as he stumbled. Thomas surveyed their group, his ranger's training evident in his quick assessment. "Ray, take Ethan and the evidence. Head for the sanctuary through Black Rock Canyon. It's too narrow for vehicles." He turned to Diana. "You and Sarah come with me. We'll leave a false trail toward Thunder Basin." Ray started to protest, but Thomas cut him off. "The evidence is what matters. Get it to Judge Harmon at the sanctuary. He'll know how to reach Director Walsh." There was no time for lengthy goodbyes. With quick nods of acknowledgement, the gravity of their situation understood by all, they separated. Ethan found himself being half carried by Ray as they veered sharply north toward a rocky outcropping barely visible through the trees. Behind them, he heard Thomas, Sarah, and Diana crashing loudly through the underbrush in the opposite direction, deliberately drawing attention. The diversion worked. The ATV engines revved as they changed course, following the more obvious trail. The helicopter hovered momentarily, then banked to follow. Ray increased their pace, his weathered face set with determination. "Black Rock Canyon is just ahead," he panted. "Sheer walls, narrow passage. They'll have to track us on foot if they figure out we split up." They reached the canyon entrance, a barely visible crack in a towering wall of dark stone. Ray helped. Ethan squeezed through the narrow opening, then followed. Inside, the temperature dropped noticeably. High walls of black rock rose on either side, allowing only a thin strip of sky to be visible above. The canyon floor was littered with boulders and loose stones, making progress slow and treacherous. "How far to the sanctuary?" Ethan asked, his breath coming in ragged gasps. 5 miles through the canyon," Ray replied grimly. "Then 2 more across open meadow. We need to reach the canyon exit by nightfall." Ethan's heart sank. In his condition, 10 more minutes seemed impossible, let alone 7 more miles. Seeing his expression, Ray's features softened slightly. "1 step at a time, son, that's all anyone can do." They pressed on, the canyon twisting and turning like a stone serpent. At times it narrowed so severely they had to turn sideways to squeeze through. At others it opened into small amphitheater-like spaces where ancient pictographs decorated the walls. Despite their dire circumstances, Ethan found himself marveling at these glimpses into the past. Handprints, animal figures, and abstract symbols left by people who had sought refuge in this same canyon perhaps thousands of years earlier. The afternoon wore on. The sounds of pursuit had faded, but neither of them believed they were truly safe. Ray set a relentless pace, stopping only when Ethan's stumbling became too frequent to ignore. During one such break, as Ethan slumped, against a boulder fighting waves of pain and exhaustion, Ray surprised him by producing a small package wrapped in waxy leaves. "Martha's special reserve," he explained, unwrapping what appeared to be some kind of dense, dark cake. "Emergency rations. 1 bite will keep you going for hours." Ethan accepted a small piece dubiously, then felt his eyes widen as the flavors hit his tongue. Honey, nuts, herbs, and something else he couldn't identify. Almost immediately, warmth spread through his body, and the fog of fatigue lifted slightly. "What's in this?" he asked, staring at the remaining portion with new respect. Ray's mouth quirked in a rare smile. "Best not to ask. Martha's recipes are her own business." He tucked the package away. "Rest a few more minutes, then we need to move." Ethan nodded, using the break to study his companion more closely. Ray's weathered face told of decades in the wilderness, but his eyes held an intelligence that suggested he hadn't always been a backwoods guardian. "How did you get involved in all this?" Ethan asked. "You don't seem like—" He trailed off, unsure how to finish without causing offense. "Like a radical environmentalist," Ray finished for him, amusement evident in his tone. "I was chief ranger for the Northern District for 22 years, believed in working within the system." His expression darkened. "Then I reported toxic waste dumping by a mining operation with powerful friends. Found myself suddenly retired with a gag order and threats against my pension if I went public." He shrugged. "The Guardians found me when I was at my lowest. Gave me purpose again." He glanced at Ethan. "We all have our stories. Martha lost her daughter to cancer caused by industrial pollution. Sarah's dance career ended when she spoke out against a major donor who was clear-cutting tribal lands. The pattern was clear. People who had tried to work within the system, only to discover the system was rigged against them. People who had lost something precious, but found a new community, a new purpose in protection and resistance." Before Ethan could respond, a faint sound echoed through the canyon, voices, still distant but unmistakable. Ray was instantly alert. "They found the canyon," he said tersely. "We need to move, now." Ignoring the protests of his battered body, Ethan pushed himself upright. They resumed their journey, moving as quickly as the treacherous footing allowed. The canyon began to widen slightly, the walls less sheer. Late afternoon sun slanted down, creating pools of golden light amid the shadows. "Almost to the exit," Ray encouraged, as they rounded yet another bend. Then he stopped so abruptly that Ethan nearly collided with him. Ahead, silhouetted against the canyon wall, stood 2 figures with rifles. Ray pulled Ethan behind a large boulder, his expression tense but calculating. "Falcon's men," he whispered. "They must have guessed our destination and circled around." Ethan's heart pounded in his ears. They were trapped, pursuers behind, armed men ahead. "What do we do?" he whispered back. Ray was silent for a long moment, his eyes scanning the canyon walls. Finally, he pointed to a narrow ledge about 15 feet up the southern wall. "There's an old game trail up there. Dangerous in your condition, but..." He didn't need to finish. The alternative was capture. With Ray's help, Ethan began the painful climb, finding handholds in the rough stone. Each movement sent spikes of agony through his injured leg, but fear proved a powerful analgesic. Halfway up, a stone dislodged beneath his foot, clattering down the canyon wall. The armed men spun toward the sound, rifles raised. "Someone's there," one shouted. "Come out now." Ray, still on the ground, made an instant decision. He stepped into view, hands raised. "Just me," he called. "Old man out for a hike. Got a bit turned around." As the men's attention fixed on Ray, Ethan continued his agonizing climb, finally hauling himself onto the narrow ledge. Below, he could hear Ray spinning an elaborate story about birdwatching and lost glasses. The men sounded skeptical, but weren't shooting yet. The ledge, as Ray had indicated, connected to a thin trail that hugged the canyon wall before disappearing around a bend. Ethan began to inch along it, one hand pressed against the rock face for balance. Behind him, Ray's voice grew more insistent, more distracting. He was buying time, drawing attention, sacrificing his own safety. Tears of gratitude and fear blurred Ethan's vision as he continued his precarious journey. The trail grew slightly, wider as he rounded the bend. Now completely hidden from the men below, it continued to climb gradually before joining a broader path that wound down toward the canyon exit. From his elevated position, Ethan could see the vast meadow beyond, painted gold by the setting sun, and at its far edge, nestled against the base of a mountain, a cluster of buildings surrounded by gardens and orchards, the sanctuary. So close, yet with his injured leg and without Ray's support, it might as well have been on another continent. A gunshot echoed through the canyon, followed by shouting. Ethan froze, heart hammering. Had they shot Ray? Were they now coming for him? Wild thoughts of rushing back, somehow helping his friend, raced through his mind. But Ray's final instructions had been clear. Get the evidence to the sanctuary. Complete the mission. Choking back a sob, Ethan forced himself to continue forward, one painful step after another. For Ray, for Martha, for the wolf, for all of them. As he emerged from the canyon into the open meadow, the vastness of the landscape struck him anew. The sun was setting behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the golden grass. In the fading light, the sanctuary seemed to glow with an inner radiance, a beacon of hope in a darkening world. Ethan took a deep breath and began the final leg of his journey, limping across the open ground. Behind him, more shouts echoed from the canyon. Ahead, a figure emerged from the sanctuary, then another, alerted by the commotion. They started toward him, still too distant to identify. Halfway across the meadow, Ethan's strength finally gave out. His injured leg buckled, and he collapsed into the sweet-smelling grass. As consciousness began to fade, he clutched the phone containing the precious evidence to his chest. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was a familiar silhouette hurrying toward him across the meadow. Martha, very much alive, her silver hair catching the last rays of the setting. Son Ethan awoke to the sound of hushed voices and the scent of herbs. Sunlight streamed through a window, illuminating a simple room with wood-paneled walls. He lay in a comfortable bed, his injured leg properly bandaged and elevated on pillows. For a moment, he thought he might have dreamed the entire ordeal, the wolf, the chase, the underground river. Then the memories flooded back. "Ray," he gasped, struggling to sit up. "They had guns. I heard a shot." A gentle hand pressed him back against the pillows. Martha stood beside the bed, looking tired, but very much alive. "Easy, young one, you're safe at the sanctuary." Her expression softened at his distress. "Ray is alive. Injured, but alive." Relief washed over Ethan, so intense it left him lightheaded. "How I heard gunfire." Martha settled into a chair beside the bed. "Ray is more resourceful than he appears. When they tried to restrain him, he created a diversion of his own, something involving a flashbang device he'd been carrying. In the confusion, he managed to escape into a side passage he knew from his ranger days." She smiled slightly. "He arrived at the sanctuary about an hour after we found you in the meadow with a bullet graze on his arm, and a colorful array of new curses. Ethan felt tears threatening. He blinked them back, focusing instead on his surroundings. The room had the feel of a cabin, rustic but comfortable. Through the window, he could see gardens and orchards stretching toward a forest edge. People moved among the plants, working with quiet purpose. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice still rough from sleep. "The Sanctuary of Living Waters," Martha replied. "Part sustainable community, part research station, part refuge, founded by conservation biologists who grew tired of fighting losing battles against corporate interests." She gestured toward the window. 40 acres of the most diverse and productive agricultural land in the region, all using traditional methods, enhanced by cutting-edge science. Ethan absorbed this, his gaze traveling over the visible portion of the sanctuary. Solar panels gleamed on distant rooftops. A large greenhouse sparkled in the morning sun. What appeared to be a classroom building buzzed with activity. And Falcon. His men. Martha's expression hardened slightly. "Still searching, but looking in all the wrong places. After you collapsed in the meadow, we brought you here through our tunnel system. As far as they know, you vanished into thin air." She paused, then added with quiet satisfaction, "They're growing desperate. Their environmental review is scheduled for tomorrow, and without you, they have no way to know what evidence we possess, or how we plan to use it." A soft knock interrupted them. The door opened to reveal Sarah carrying a tray laden with food. The dancer's face lit up when she saw Ethan awake. "Our hero returns to the land of the living. How's the leg?" "Better," Ethan replied, suddenly aware of how hungry he was. The pain had subsided to a dull ache, and he could wiggle his toes without wincing. "What happened to Thomas and Diana? Did they make it?" Sarah set the tray across his lap, a steaming bowl of stew, fresh bread, and a cup of something that smelled like mint. They led Falcon's men on a merry chase halfway to Idaho before doubling back. Diana arrived last night. Thomas is still out there monitoring Falcon's movements. She perched on the edge of the bed. "Eat. Dr. Abernathy says you need protein to heal." Ethan didn't need to be told twice. As he ate, Martha and Sarah filled him in on the events of the past 24 hours. Judge Harmon had successfully contacted EPA Director Walsh using a secure channel established years ago for just such emergencies. She had agreed to delay the environmental review pending investigation of the evidence, but only if that evidence could be delivered to her personally, with chain of custody documented. Willow and half the Guardian Council were already in Jackson Hole, preparing for the handoff. "So it all depends on my video and the mapping data?" Ethan asked between bites. "Serve the surprisingly delicious stew." Martha nodded. "Combined with testimony from several Guardians who work within the system, a park biologist, 2 environmental engineers, and Judge Harmon himself." She leaned forward. "But Falcon suspects something is happening. He's called in every favor, deployed every resource. The road to Jackson Hole is heavily monitored." Ethan frowned. "Then how will you get the evidence to Director Walsh?" Sarah and Martha exchanged looks. "That," said Sarah with a hint of mischief, "is where you come in." After breakfast, Dr. Abernathy, a brisk woman with salt and pepper hair and the calm demeanor of someone who had treated everything from minor scrapes to gunshot wounds, examined Ethan's leg. "Remarkable improvement," she pronounced. "Martha's poultice did most of the work. You're young and healthy. With a proper brace, you'll be mobile. Enough?" "Mobile enough for what?" Ethan asked, though he already suspected the answer. "For Phase 2, came a familiar voice from the doorway. Ray stood there, his left arm in a sling, but otherwise looking remarkably unscathed for a man who had been shot at less than 24 hours earlier. "Good to see you vertical, kid." Ethan felt a surge of emotion at the sight of his friend and protector. I heard the gunshot." Ray waved away his concern with his good hand. "Took more than a scratch to keep me down. Besides, I promised Martha I'd bring you safely to the sanctuary, and I don't break promises to that woman. She knows too many ways to make a man regret it." His attempt at humor didn't entirely mask the affection in his voice. Dr. Abernathy fitted Ethan with a high-tech brace that supported his injured leg while allowing limited mobility. With a cane for additional support, he found he could walk short distances without too much discomfort. They made their way to what appeared to be the sanctuary's central building, a large timber structure with a stone foundation. Inside, a spacious room served as combination meeting hall, dining area and operations center. Maps covered one wall, dotted with pins and sticky notes. A sophisticated communication setup occupied another corner. Around a large table in the center, several guardians were deep in discussion. Diana looked up as they entered. Good timing. We were just finalizing the decoy plan. Judge Harmon, the distinguished older man from the Cave Council, nodded in greeting. Young Mr. Mitchell, a pleasure to see you recovered. Your contribution to our cause has been invaluable. Ethan felt himself flush at the formal acknowledgement. I just happened to be in the right place at the wrong time. Or the wrong place at the right time, countered Ray. Depends on your perspective. Diana motioned them to the table, where a detailed map of the region was spread out. Here's the situation. We have multiple copies of the evidence. Ethan's video, the hydrological survey data, and supporting documentation. 3 teams will attempt to reach Jackson Hole by different routes. She pointed to marked trails on the map. 2 are decoys, designed to draw Falcon's attention and resources. Her finger moved to a 3rd route. The real evidence will travel this way, through Granite Pass, then along the old fire road to the eastern entrance of Grand Teton National Park. From there, a guardian with proper credentials will drive directly to the conference center. She looked up at Ethan. Each team needs a teenage boy who could, from a distance, be mistaken for you. Ethan blinked as understanding dawned. You want me to go with the real evidence? Judge Harmon nodded. Falcon is expecting us to hide you away, to keep you safe. The last thing he'll anticipate is us putting you directly in the field. Sometimes, the best hiding place is in plain sight. The plan was audacious, but Ethan could see the logic. Who would expect an injured 15-year-old to be carrying the very evidence that could destroy a multi-million-dollar development deal? Still, a knot of anxiety formed in his stomach. What if we're caught? What if I can't keep up because of my leg? Martha, who had been quiet during the briefing, spoke up. You won't be alone. I'll be with you every step of the way. Her calm certainty soothed his nerves somewhat. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation. Ethan was fitted with hiking clothes that would support his injured leg while allowing mobility. Martha taught him basic techniques for moving quietly through the forest and how to use natural features for concealment. Others briefed him on the route, showing him detailed topographical maps and photographs of key landmarks. By evening, exhaustion had reclaimed him, and he returned to his room to rest before their pre-dawn departure. He was surprised to find Sarah waiting for him, a small package in her hands. A gift, she explained, handing it to him, for tomorrow. Inside was a beautifully crafted walking stick, the wood polished to a warm glow. Intricate carvings spiraled up its length, animals, plants, and abstract patterns that somehow conveyed a sense of movement and flow. It's beautiful, Ethan breathed, testing its weight in his hand. I made it yesterday while you were recovering, Sarah said. White ash, strong but flexible, like you've proven to be. She demonstrated how the stick could be used to support his weight and navigate difficult terrain. It's also a reminder that you're part of something larger now. Each guardian leaves their mark, however small, on the ongoing story of this land. Later, as he lay in bed watching moonlight pattern the RTT ceiling, Ethan reflected on how drastically his life had changed in just a few days. A week ago, his biggest concern had been whether his classmates would mock his enthusiasm for rare plants. Now he was preparing to help deliver evidence that could thwart a powerful corporation and preserve one of America's most precious wild places. Sleep came fitfully, punctuated by dreams of wolves running through underground rivers and mushrooms that glowed in time with his heartbeat. He awoke before dawn to a gentle knock. Martha entered, carrying a steaming mug and a small pack. It's time, she said simply. Their departure from the sanctuary was quiet and efficient. 3 groups left at staggered intervals, each taking different paths into the surrounding wilderness. Ethan and Martha, accompanied by a guardian named Michael, who would be their driver. Once they reached the park entrance, set out just as the first pale light of dawn touched the eastern sky. Using Sarah's walking stick, Ethan found he could maintain a steady pace despite his injury. The morning air was crisp and invigorating, scented with pine and sage. Their route took them through a series of small valleys and hidden passes, avoiding the main trails where Falcon's men might be watching. By mid-morning, they had covered several miles without incident. During a brief rest at a small stream, Martha produced a communications device from her pack. "Checking in," she murmured into. Aid then listened intently. A smile touched her lips. "The decoys are working. Falcon's teams have been spotted following both of the other routes." Michael nodded in satisfaction. "That's why Diana went with the northern group. She's the most recognizable. They'll focus their best resources on tracking her." They continued, on the terrain growing more challenging as they approached Granite Pass. The trail narrowed, winding between massive boulders and stands of twisted juniper. The walking stick proved invaluable, its grip fitting Ethan's hand as if made for him, its strength supporting him on the steepest sections. Around noon, they paused in the shadow of a towering rock formation. Michael scouted ahead while Martha shared a simple meal of flatbread, dried fruit, and jerky with Ethan. "How's the leg holding up?" she asked, her keen eyes assessing his condition. "Better than I expected," Ethan admitted. The pain was there, but manageable, a dull background throb rather than the sharp agony of previous days. "Your medicine works wonders." Martha nodded, pleased. "The body knows how to heal itself. The herbs just remind it." She studied him thoughtfully. "You've shown remarkable resilience, Ethan. Not many your age would have endured what you have." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I didn't have much choice." "We always have choices," Martha corrected gently. "You could have returned to your school group when Willow offered the option. You could have given up in the canyon. You chose to continue to stand with us." Before Ethan could respond, Michael returned, his expression tense. "We have a problem. Falcon himself is up ahead with 4 men, right on our path. They've set up some kind of checkpoint at the narrowest part of the pass." Martha absorbed this news calmly. "Can we go around?" Michael shook his head. "Not without adding hours to our journey. We'd miss the rendezvous with Director Walsh." They were silent for a moment, the gravity of their situation sinking in. Then Ethan spoke up. "What if we don't try to sneak past them? What if we walk right up to them?" Martha and Michael stared at him. "That's suicide," Michael protested. "They'll capture you and take the evidence." "Not if they don't know I have it," Ethan countered. An idea was forming, risky but potentially brilliant. "They're looking for someone trying to smuggle evidence. They're not looking for—" He trailed off, turning to Martha with growing excitement. "You said you know all about misdirection." As Ethan outlined his plan, Martha's expression changed. From skepticism to cautious approval. Michael remained doubtful, but acknowledged they had few alternatives. They spent the next hour making preparations, modifying their appearance and rehearsing their approach. Then, with determined steps, they continued toward the checkpoint. Falcon's men had positioned themselves at a natural bottleneck, where the trail squeezed between 2 massive rock walls. From a distance, Ethan could see them scanning the surrounding terrain with binoculars. No attempt at stealth would succeed here. As planned, Michael dropped back, concealing himself among the rocks, with a clear line of sight to the checkpoint. Martha adjusted her clothing and posture, once again transforming into the seemingly frail old woman Ethan had first seen in her cabin. He allowed his own exhaustion and pain to show, leaning heavily on the walking stick, his face drawn. Together, they walked openly down the trail toward the waiting men. As they approached, Falcon stepped forward, recognition and surprise flickering across his face. "Well, well," he said smoothly. "The missing student and the mountain witch. Quite a coincidence." Martha squinted at him, playing her role perfectly. "We're just heading to the clinic in Jackson. My grandson's hurt his leg. Rangers said this was the quickest way." Falcon's gaze locked onto Ethan, noting his obvious injury and pained expression. "Did they now? And what happened to your leg, son?" Ethan looked down, projecting teenage embarrassment. "Fell off a cliff trying to get a photo of a stupid flower. Grandma had to come rescue me from my school trip." He shifted uncomfortably. "My parents are flying in to meet us at the hospital. They're super mad." The story aligned perfectly with what Falcon already knew, a student with a leg injury who had been separated from his school group. But this version stripped away any suggestion of the boy being a witness or threat. Falcon's men exchanged glances, clearly uncertain. One of them gestured toward Martha's pack. "Mind if we take a look in your bag, ma'am? Security measures." Martha clutched the pack protectively. "My medicines are private, traditional remedies passed down through generations." Falcon stepped closer, his voice hardening. "I'm afraid I must insist." With apparent reluctance, Martha surrendered the pack. The men searched it thoroughly, finding exactly what they expected. Herbs, bandages, a few personal items. Nothing suspicious, nothing incriminating. Falcon studied them both, suspicion warring with logic. "And you have no connection to the environmental activists who call themselves Guardians?" Ethan adopted a look of confusion. "The what?" Martha snorted dismissively. "Those tree huggers, always making noise about something or other. We're just trying to get my grandson's leg looked at before infection sets in." She fixed Falcon with a piercing stare. "Unless you're suggesting you'd prevent an injured child from receiving medical care. That would make quite a story for those reporters in Jackson covering the environmental conference." It was a masterful move, reminding Falcon of the public relations disaster that would ensue if he detained an injured teenager and his grandmother without clear cause. Ethan could almost see the calculations running behind the man's eyes. Finally, Falcon stepped aside. "Of course not. We're simply maintaining security in the area. There have been incidents." He gestured for his men to let them pass. "I hope your leg heals quickly, young man." With measured steps, Martha and Ethan continued along the trail, neither too fast nor too slow. Ethan could feel Falcon's eyes boring into his back, searching for any sign that might betray them. Once they were around the bend and out of sight, Michael rejoined them, his expression a mixture of amazement and relief. "That was either the bravest or the craziest thing I've ever seen," he whispered. "How did you know it would work?" Ethan managed a tired smile. "I didn't. But I figured Falcon is looking for guardians with evidence, not an injured kid with his grandmother." He patted his leg brace, where the memory card containing his video footage and a flash drive with the hydrological data were securely hidden within the composite material of the brace itself, the last place anyone would think to search. The remainder of their journey passed without incident. By late afternoon, they reached the old fire road, where a nondescript Park Service vehicle awaited them. Michael changed quickly into a ranger uniform, complete with authentic ID. "From here we drive straight to the conference center," he explained as he helped Ethan into the back seat. "Director Walsh is expecting us at 5. Martha squeezed Ethan's hand. "You did it, young one. You carried the truth through." The drive through Grand Teton National Park was surreal in its normalcy. Tourists stopped at scenic overlooks, snapping photos and enjoying the late summer weather, oblivious to the drama unfolding around them. At the conference center, a side entrance had been arranged to avoid attention. Director Walsh, a formidable woman with steel gray hair and piercing intelligence in her eyes, was waiting in a private meeting room with Judge Harmon and Willow. "Mr. Mitchell," she greeted Ethan formally, "I understand you've gone to extraordinary lengths to bring me this evidence." With Martha's help, Ethan removed the memory card and flash drive from his leg brace. His hands trembled slightly as he placed them on the table. "It's all here. What they did to the wolf, what they're planning to do to the park, and the underground river system that makes the whole development structurally unsound." Director Walsh inserted the memory card into her laptop. As the video began to play, her expression grew increasingly grave. Judge Harmon provided context, explaining the significance of what they were seeing and the supporting hydrological data. When the presentation concluded, Walsh was silent for a long moment. "This is definitive," she finally said. "Not only environmental violations, but criminal conspiracy. The review is suspended, effective immediately. I'll contact the Justice Department within the hour." Ethan felt a wave of emotion wash over him, relief, exhaustion, and an unexpected sense of loss. It was over. They had won. But what happened now? As if reading his thoughts, Willow approached him. "Your school group has been told you were found by backcountry rangers and received medical treatment for a hiking accident." You'll be reunited with them tomorrow." She smiled slightly. "You're quite the hero to them now, the boy who survived alone in the wilderness." The irony wasn't lost on Ethan. He hadn't been alone at all. He'd been surrounded by some of the most remarkable people he'd ever met. "And what about all of you, the Guardians?" Martha took his hand. "We continue our work, as we always have, but now with a powerful ally in Director Walsh." She glanced at the EPA director, who nodded in confirmation. "Some battles are won in the light, others in the shadows. Both are necessary." The next morning, as Ethan prepared to leave the sanctuary and return to his regular life, he found himself on the central building's porch with Martha, Ray, and Sarah. Ray's arm was healing well. Sarah had already begun choreographing a new dance piece inspired by their journey. Martha simply looked pleased, like a teacher whose student had exceeded all expectations. "Will I see you again?" Ethan asked, surprised by how much the answer mattered to him. The three exchanged glances. "The Guardians always have room for new members," Ray said carefully, "especially those who have proven their courage and commitment." Martha nodded. "You have a gift, Ethan. Not just your knowledge of plants or your quick thinking, but your ability to see connections between species, between actions, between choices." Sarah added, "And you're young. You can work within the system in ways we no longer can. University, research positions, policy roles, paths that are closed to those of us who have been labeled troublemakers." Ethan considered this. A week ago, he'd been just a shy botany enthusiast, invisible to his peers, uncertain of his future. Now he stood straighter despite his injured leg, confidence born of survival and purpose. "I want to help. I want to be part of this." Martha smiled, a full, radiant expression that transformed her weathered face. "You already are." She pressed something into his hand, a small carved token bearing the image of a wolf, a reminder of where it began and a key to finding us again when the time is right. As Michael drove him back towards civilization and his waiting school, "Group," Ethan watched the sanctuary recede in the side mirror until it disappeared among the trees. But he knew it wasn't truly gone. Like the underground river, it continued its essential work unseen, sustaining life, preserving balance, flowing toward a future where perhaps such secret resistance would no longer be necessary. He closed his hand around the wolf token, feeling its contours press into his palm. Not an ending, he realized, a beginning. His leg would heal, the evidence would do its work. Justice would prevail in this one small corner of the world. And somewhere in the vast wilderness of Yellowstone, gray wolves would continue to run free, maintaining the delicate balance of an ecosystem